All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming back from lunch. So I was asked to speak for about 10 minutes on the story of WSO2. So I will very briefly give a quick outline of how we came into existence and what we are doing now. So the company started 20 years ago. And before that, I had started something called the Lanka Software Foundation, which is an open source software foundation. And the purpose there was to say Sri Lanka as a country at the time, and in fact this part of the world, was not really into producing software technology. We were all about using other people's technology and creating solutions, doing work for others, doing services. And open source was a vehicle to be able to create software products and get it out to the entire market. Entire world, not just some local market, regional market, none of this stuff, but the entire world. And open source software in 2005, actually LSF was started in 2003. At that time, open source was the disruptive, kind of radical, out-of-control kid who was challenging Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, all the big companies in the world who were very much a proprietary software model. And the difference, just to explain for those who are not familiar, open source fundamentally means the source code of the software is available, but what it really means is you have the ability to take the software and do what you want with it. Right? It's not this fact that the software is available, the fact that it's about lock-in free, it's about freedom, and there's a concept of certain kinds of freedoms that open source software gives you and so on. And of course, if you fast forward to now, the entire world is powered by software, right? In 2011, Mark Andreessen wrote an essay about software is eating the world. That was 2011, which was 14 years ago. Now software has eaten the world. Every single thing in the world is powered by software. And so the power of open source as a vehicle for delivering independence in software is very, very important. Because if you're a country, say take India, our neighbor near here, India is a global power, China, all these large countries. Given the way geopolitics works, now even European countries have realized, well, I can't just rely on US software for everything because it's not stable, right? One election and the entire trust system that was sort of operating the world can change. So, and when you have the entire operation of the system being powered by software, if the core of the software is something that is controlled by one country, one politics, one set of rules, one government, one person, that's a serious security risk you're taking when you do that. So that was the purpose behind saying open source software is critical to empowering everybody in the world to be a creator, not just be a consumer. That was the point at which we started. WSO2 started with the space of enterprise middleware, which is the stuff that you don't see, you don't feel, but it's underneath to make everything work. Okay? So, for example, in India, if you get a loan for any agricultural thing, you're using WSO2 software underneath. Nobody knows about it. If you use Arogya Setu, which is the healthcare app, you're using our stuff underneath. If you pay your taxes online, you're using our stuff underneath. If you go take a train, you're using our stuff underneath. So all over, and that's just one example of India. We can go country by country. We power, I think we manage about 2 billion identities in the world, and we power massive parts of the world, and nobody knows about it. That's how it should be, because the stuff we do is inside. We are the middle. No end users shouldn't know there is a middle or be exposed to the middle. And if you see the middle, that means something has gone wrong, which we don't want to see happen. Right? So anyway, so the company started as an open source software company, targeting a particular technology domain, this enterprise infrastructure space. And one key thing is when you start a tech company, a product company, you have to build depth. You don't win by having a shallow capacity. So you need to be the best in the world in whatever you do. Right? And one unique thing about Sri Lanka is that almost all our engineering team, actually all our engineering team, are from Sri Lanka, and almost all of them were fresh graduates from universities here. Right? And the reason we take fresh graduates and not people who worked somewhere else most of the time is because fresh graduates have not been damaged intellectually with management that says, no, you can't do that. Right? We want to take people who say, okay, I've been told I got to solve this problem, I'm going to go figure it out, I'll do it. So best example, recently when the DeepSeek paper came out from China, when the technical paper came out, one of the important parts of that everybody else copied very quickly was that they had come up with a new reinforcement learning algorithm. And the guy who did that algorithm was a kid who had graduated 2 years ago, didn't know anything about reinforcement learning or machine learning. He was a mathematics graduate. He thought from first principles and came up with a new way of doing things that all the pundits in the US and everywhere else hadn't figured out, right? That is the power of taking people who haven't been polluted with being told, no, 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 it's hard, no, 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 we don't know how to do it, no, it cannot be done, and saying, just do whatever the hell you can do and make it work, and people will figure it out, right? That's the way we have built WSO2. So as a business, we started in 2005, we raised venture capital. We raised a total of about $70 million in primary venture capital. It was very difficult to raise money because I refused to move back to the US. I live in Sri Lanka. And the general model was, if you're a tech company, the founders and the management team is in the US, the labor force is here, right? In India, in Sri Lanka, in the cheap geographies. Of course, now Trump has said, no, 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 not that stuff, everybody move back there. That's a different story. But that was the model. That was always been the model for tech companies. And not being in the US, for 90% of the investors, or they say 95, 98% of the investors, it's like nothing doing. If the management is not living in California, or at least in the US, you're not going to get money. So it's very difficult to raise money. Every single time, we actually had only one person who was willing to invest. And each one of those times, we had some lucky break involved. The first guy who invested as an institutional investor was Intel Capital. And actually, that's another interesting. So first investor was Intel Capital. Second was Quest Software. Third was Cisco. All corporate VCs, not a single institutional financial investor. Because none of them want to take a risk of saying, what the hell are these guys? All open source, giving everything away free. Other side of the world, all this stuff, not okay. So the corporate ones had a more strategic angle, right? Intel was actually Pradeep, who invested, wanted to find a company in this side of the world, which was a deep enterprise technology company, and he couldn't find anything in India. That's why he invested in Sri Lanka, in WSO2. In fact, they invested $4 million in 2006, but they had never invested here, so their legal team was very concerned that they would give us $4 million, we'll transfer it to the bank, that I and the CFO would transfer to our money and walk away, and they wouldn't know what to do with it. Right? Because they have no idea how the legal system works, right? They've never done it. So they gave it to us in 2 tranches. They gave $2 million, and 2 years later, they gave us the next tranche. Right? So that was the level of unawareness at that time. But Pradeep, so we needed that lucky break. I think I talked to maybe 40 investors at the time. I pitched to every single major VC in the US, and I only managed to get 4. I pitched myself to at least 150 VCs, one-on-one. Right? Various kinds of investors. I only managed to get 4 to say yes. Right? 3 out of those 4 were the last straw. If any of those straws didn't pick, we would have died. Right? So when you build a company, that's the way you need to operate, in my opinion. You operate with there's no point in staying alive. If you're going to build a tech company and trying to build a company that can challenge the world, there's no point in operating so you can stay alive. You operate to win or you lose, and that's fine. Right? And that's a very important point that a lot of people operate to keep it safe. Let's not die. What's the point of living if you're working to not die? You should live. If you don't live, just die anyway. Might as well, right? So anyway, so the company, so we are now more than $100 million in revenue. All our software is given away free, right? We make $100 million on giving software away free. And we anchor so much of the world. We were bought by a Swedish private equity firm called EQT last year for $600 million. And just very quickly, there's an interesting Swedish angle. The first funding we got for LSF was a $100,000 grant from the Swedish International Development Agency in 2004, right? And so it was public money from Sweden that enabled LSF to do the first project. In fact, and EQT is many of the LPs for EQT is Swedish public money, pension funds, various other things, right? So in fact, the public of Sweden invested in something which they paid a lot of money for. And of course, when a private equity firm buys a company, they don't buy it for charity, right? They buy it to make money. So their goal is to sell the company in 5 years at least 5 times the price, right? So my goal is, I started WSO2 because I want to build a company that lasts for a very, very long time. Most tech companies don't last for 20 years. Most tech companies, build a niche that somebody else can buy, make the niche, sell it, and move on. That's not the way we wanted the company to be. We want a company that can be a permanent software company. How do you build the next Microsoft? How do you build the next Apple? How do you build the next Oracle, next IBM? IBM is the only company that's lasted 100 years. The next ones are Oracle, Microsoft, Apple. SAP probably are in the same 50, 60-year range. But then the numbers just drop out dramatically. I'm in red color time now. I'll wrap up quickly. So the point is, my goal at WSO2 is, I'm the founder, but when you start a company, if you want it to last many years, it can't be about you. Jack Ma made this comment about Alibaba in, I think it was in 1999. He said, I want the company to last for 3 centuries. Right? That means 2100 something. And this was the company was started in 1999. And this guy is not going to live, okay, unless you listen to the Chinese president, the Russian president saying we can replace parts and live on. Jack Ma could probably afford to do that too. But generally, the idea is not to live for 300 years or 150 years, right? So it cannot be about the founder. A company that lasts for a long time is not about the founder. If you look at Microsoft, Bill Gates, then Steve Ballmer, and now Satya Nadella, right? Completely different style of leadership, different color, all kinds of stuff has changed. And that's how it should be if you're going to make something for a long time. So my goal is, in this 5-year window, is establish WSO2 so it can survive the next transition. I can't guarantee the next transition, because unfortunately, the way the world works now, there is no permanent, safe place for a company. You can IPO, but somebody can just buy you out from IPO anytime. Now, there's so much money that you take it private. Very, very common thing these days for technology companies. So there is no such thing called we can guarantee the company lives on. So the company has to fight to survive. So there's a book called The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek. In that one, he has this thing about the way you should look at investors. So I also used to look at investors, they are the owners. In fact, investors are not the owners, because they rent the company to make some money. They should look at them as renters, which is a perfectly fine thing to do, because you need that money in order to operate the business. But their goal is not to own this forever. The people who work in the company are the actual owners. Whether they own all the shares or not is not the point. The purpose, the direction, the vision, the guidance, where are you going? Why are you doing this? Why do you show up in the morning to do work and do something tomorrow? That's individuals in the company, not the investors. Investors are very important. Shareholders are very important. I report to the board. The board is appointed by the shareholders, right? So I have a boss. I got to keep my boss happy. That's part of the deal. So one of the things the guy who hired me into IBM told me is you have to learn to manage your managers. So I have learned over the years how to manage my managers. Otherwise, I can't do what I want to do. And if I can't do what I want to do, I'm doing somebody else's stuff. That's boring. And of course, people who report to me are not allowed to manage their manager, right? Only I can do that. So anyway, that's the story of WSO2. We started from zero. We were negative, by the way, for 14 years. We're losing money for 14 years. Right? If you want to build a product company, don't expect to run profitably from day one. It doesn't work like that. Software product companies have to lose money to make it work, because you have to invest, and grow. Right? It took us 14 years to become profitable, and now we've been profitable since, 6 years ago. And of course, now we are owned by a private equity firm, and now we're at a size where we don't need to not run profitably. Just for comparison, one of our competitors, MuleSoft, when they were our size, they were losing $80 million. When they were $100 million in revenue, they went public at the time. You can read the S1. They were $80 million negative. When we were $100 million revenue, we made $15 million. Right? So that tells you the kind of money games that the world can play. But that style of investment is pretty much over now, because the zero interest rate, all this free money world is, at least in the current cycle, is over. So now it's a lot more rational business operation. All right. I'm sorry I'm over time. Thank you very much.